Hey guys, and welcome to a battle between the High Elves, led by Papa Palpatine, up against the Dark Elves, led by P. Butter, in a very confusing name up here, which I'm not going to attempt to pronounce, but I believe it is P. Butter, who's a very good multiplayer player. So wait, let's hop in here and check out the Battle of the Grudges here, the two pointy ears going at it, the old school classic. So for the front line of the High Elves here, we have a mixture of Spearmen and White Lines of Chase. Always good to see these guys in action. I don't see the White Lines as much as I would quite like. I think they're relatively okay for their points cost. It certainly depends on their matchup, but they're going to be able to break down Bleak Swords and Dread Spears relatively effectively here, as well as being able to deal damage to any chariots and light cavalry that they do in fact catch. It looks like in the secondary line we do have a nice bunch of archers, so we do have basic archers on either flank doing just decent overall cheap long range missile fire, and in the Ever Queen's Court Guard, Regiment of Renowned Sisters of Avalon, these ladies will melt opponents. I'm very excited to see them in conjunction with some of the new DLC stuff that is going to be dropping Thursday as well. It looks like we have a rather large cav contingent coming in with 1, 2, 3 units of Dragon Princes. Bad to the bone stuff here from the High Elves, certainly coming in with some furious shock cav. We also have the Fireborn here doing that fire damage and being just generally all-round better troops. Coming in as well with that good old 70% fire resistance and 20% physical resistance. Leading the forces today, we do have the squishiest elf himself, Teclis, riding on top of a mighty steed. He is going to be coming in with the glorious Bound Fiery Convocation, of course bringing his potions, Regrowth, Enfeebling Foe, and Net of Amantok, which is just such a good spell in almost all matchups. Now for the forces of the Dark Elves today, in the front line it looks like we are rocking Bleak Swords, and as well as 1 unit of Dread Spears. Now the Bleak Swords will certainly cut for their way through the Spearmen quite happily, but White Lions will give them a little bit of a run for their money. It looks like some Cold One Knights in the back as well, going to have to try and punch above their weight up against the Dragon Princes, but they don't do too bad. They are of course anti-large and a lot more cost effective. It looks like in the backlines we have a Bloodrack Medusa as well. Such a fantastic model. A real kind of standout model from the last DLC that came out. Unfortunately, not the most useful, unfortunately, but we're going to be interested to see how she works. I can see her doing some pretty good damage in this matchup, much like the Ancient Salamander does for the Lizardmen. And then we have a huge overload on this right-hand flank. We have Cold One Dread Knights. Hell yes, awesome to see these guys in action, as well as the Knights of the Ebon Claw, the Regiment of Renowned version. These guys are hardcore and should be able to do some pretty good fights actually. It'd be nice to see them in isolation up against Dragon Princes to see who does win. Over on this side, he does have a Sorcerer of Shadows as well, coming with Enfeebling Foe and Pendulum. Pendulum, a classic against the High Elves. And Malus Darkblade, fantastic to see him as well. Doesn't want to be left and forgotten about. He is, of course, one of the DLC lords from the last DLC. He's coming with the Blood Price, of course, the Demon Curse, all that good stuff, and Tazarkan, where he can transform into that demon, which unfortunately does make him lose health over time, but makes him a much more badass combatant. The Warp Sword of Cain as well going to be helping heal him up to counteract the demon a little bit. Looks like we have 1 Scourge Runner Chariot as well, and we're going to get the battle underway. So really fun build actually by both players. Wasn't expecting either of these. I think they're a little bit off meta. Interesting to see what this overload flank does with the Cold One Dread Knights. This is really badass, and certainly going to be a menace in the night with Malus Darkblade there to protect them. Front line probably going to be favouring the High Elves for the most part, unless there's effective cycle charging from these Knights and the Scourge Runner Chariots. But then again, the Medusa could perhaps turn that engagement in their favour. It's going to be very interesting to see how her shots do indeed land, and if she gets sniped out by the Ever Queen's Court Guard, of course. I'll just loosen just 1 or 2 nice little testing volleys towards the Bleak Swords, certainly sending a message there. And the Ever Queen's Court Guard, that's always going to be a horrible mouthful to say, do start unleashing some pretty nice plasma shots there into the rear of these Cold One Knights, doing some really effective damage straight off the gate. They're so good in conjunction with Texas Net. Looks like the Dark Elves are setting up a flank overload on the left-hand side of the heavy cav. Looks like one of the cavalry is protecting the Sorcerer, and the other one rolling dirty with Malus Darkblade as his royal bodyguards. But Palpatine going to be bringing back his Dragon Princess, getting ready for an almighty clash there. Could certainly come down to how the both opponents do wield their magic in that instance. Dread Spears getting prepared to face off against Dread Spears. Oh, sorry, Spearmen versus Dread Spears. It's going to be a bit of a wet noodle contest. White Lines of Chase about to get run over. Nope, looks like the target is in fact switched. And the Squadron of Chariots just trying to bait out some archer fire as a huge shot comes in from the Medusa, doing some really nice damage. But a net is going to keep that Squadron in place. And a huge engagement is about to get caught. It looks like the Dragon Princes do react just about in time to get a nice counter charge there. And in come the Fireball. They should do some really effective damage. You can see them slaughtering their troops there. A brilliant pendulum in the back line does shut down the Everqueen's Courtguard hard. However, it looks like they did manage to finish off the Squadron of Chariots first. But this is where I'm really interested. We do have Cold One Dread Knights looping up and coming in for a flank attack now. And Tazarkan popped very, very early here. Malus was incredibly healthy, but it looks like he really wants to pound down the Dragon Princes as much as possible. Of course, it does change his ability, so in comes a Reaper of Souls, and Feeble Foe is popped as well, and this engagement is certainly going to go in the favour of the Dark Elves, although there is some Spearmen here to saturate, as well as Teclis trying to get some health here, and no way is he going to be doing the big Convocation. He does indeed. The Fiery Convocation comes down, and Glorious Phoenix is going to be carving up some pretty decent damage there onto the Knights of Ebon Claw. Of course, that is better against tightly packed infantry, but still decent work overall. Dragon Princes are fleeing in all directions. So we're going to slow this down a little bit as we've been kind of, delving into the back lines quite a bit. But in the front lines, it looks like there's been a really nice rear charge here by the White Lions, who did, of course, win their initial engagements, loop up and around and surround these Dread Spears, which is going to be fantastic value. Over here, Dragon Prince is going toe-to-toe with Cold One Knights, slightly in favour of them so far. But Bleak Swords have broken into the back line and starting to shut down at the Archer Corps. And the Bladderak Medusa, 37 kills on Sisters is very impressive. And she is taking a little bit of Overwatch fire now from the Archers coming in. Technis nearly cackling in the back and trying to stay protected. So Dragon Princes are rallying, which is certainly good news for the High Elves. They're going to need them here. It looks like an Enfeebled Foe was popped on the Cold One Dread Knights, but they did manage to win that engagement relatively handily. White Lines of Chase have now popped in. And as you can see, Malus Darkblade is now constantly taking damage in his glorious Tazarkan state here, as he does Raw Victorious. It's a very cool model overall. And he's slowly munching his way through, but the longer the High Elves can now drag out this game, the more advantage they are going to get. They do have a relatively mobile force overall. Looks like the Sorceress is trying to get into the back lines on the Everqueen's Courtguard, but a very well-timed net. It's like a pendulum going and doing some okay damage in the back line there, but nothing like earlier. And that poor Sorceress just has to stand there very angrily watching the Sisters unleash arrow after arrow. It looks like Teclis actually saved her from one or two shots there and did engage in combat himself. Probably wants to flee back now, though. She's taking a huge amount of work as Malus does start to scoot his boot into the back line on top of these Dragon Princes. Doing some pretty good work. These guys are still 37 models, which is nothing to scoff at. A big Enfeebling Foe comes in, as well as a Bloodstorm, and these guys need to run for the hills. They're getting torn up pretty bad now. Looks like Sorceress did eventually make it into combat against their Sisters. So both units do, in fact, break, but the Squadron of Chariots should be able to run these guys down, whereas the Sorceress has a very good chance of rallying. In the back line, it looks like the High Elves did manage to clear up, for the most part, all that heavy cav. Malus, as well, is being ignored as much as possible, which is really good play here, but the High Elves on the ropes a little bit, perhaps. Not doing too bad, winning quite a few engagements. Actually, I'd say they're maybe slightly ahead, simply due to Malus being in the Tazarkan state. If he was, fully healthy or not losing health at such a rapid decline, I think Dark Elves would be in an okay position. He's certainly bouncing around and doing a decent amount of work here, up to 35 kills, all up against Dragon Princes for the most part. And he's getting in here and tearing these guys up pretty comfortably, ripping these proud High Elf warriors from their steed. As another Fiery Convocation, it looks like, is going to be bursting down. But as we'll see, it won't do too much damage here, as it is up against loosely packed Knights and so forth. But, it does pop those Cold One Dread Knights into Rampage. And for the most part, the High Elves are winning the infantry fight. Bladderak Medusa racking 115 kills. Just been sitting here all day, unleashing her nasty shots before delving into combat last. Works a lot like the Ancient Salamander. I think if left alone can really cause a lot of problems. Squadron of Chariots doing their usual annoying harass and popping into the back lines. Malus is getting very, very low, however. In the black line, Dragon Princes are rallying all over the field, and the High Elves are certainly reasserting themselves into the battle in this late game. And I think popping Tazarkan early was a big mistake here from the Dark Elves. It did allow them to push through that back line and really shut down some of those Dragon Princes, but then you're constantly on a timer at that point. If he was still Malus now and he just popped Tazarkan, got that big health burst and so forth, I think it'd be nigh on unstoppable against what is left for the beat-up forces of the High Elves. Perhaps the Dark Elves wouldn't have been in such an advantageous position to begin with, I suppose. Malus does pop in here, running over some of these glorious spearmen, but down to just 700 health. It's going to push the balance power further and further against him, and it looks like that is going to be game with the Dark Elves losing faith as they see their lord crumble to the power of the demon. Very well played with two interesting builds. We're going to delve into the end screen now. Looks like Malus doing his little best here, down to 400 health. It's going to be carving up one or two of these Fireborn, just as a show of spite here, while he does, of course, ride on the glorious mount spite. And bring down a couple of these proud warriors for the effort, but down he goes. Felled at last. He is at peace. So let's go to the end stats here. That was a really fun game, so massive shout out first and foremost to Papa Palpatine for sending this one in. It was a really good time overall. Now for his forces, I like the Bat to the Bones and Dragon Prince build. They do struggle up against armour occasionally, but can be a decent counter to Cold One Knights and so forth, especially when combined in with Techless. I like the ranged forces as well, and this is something I think we're going to see a ton more of the latest DLC. One of these archers being replaced by the Regiment Renowned one, which makes units weaker to fire, and then combined with Sisters of Avalon. So certainly expect to see this type of core of a build into the future. Now for P-Butter here, really fun builds overall. I love the Bad to the Bones Cold One Dread Knights, allowing them to win those cav engagements and slowly start to reeve through the back line. Blood Dragon Medusa as well. It's a really nice inclusion. Don't get to see her too often simply because of how squishy she is. And you can see Sisters can absolutely thump her if she gets caught in a net. But it looks like that instead was saved for the Scourge Runner Chariots. And Malus Darkblade, someone I wish we saw a lot more of. And he did pretty damn decent. 66 kills up against elite infantry. He was bouncing around quite nicely. Unfortunately, didn't have the pace on him, of course, to catch Techless, and he was always on that timer once he did pop to Zarkan. I think used slightly early, but it did allow them to really punch through those Dragon Princes, so who's to say how the battle would have gone if he did stay in control of himself instead of falling into the clutches of the demon. Well, I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, please do consider giving this video a big old thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed, feel free to subscribe. We're going to be doing all kinds of Total War content, and of course it is a really exciting time going into the future of all the new stuff dropping later this week. We do have a tournament coming up Friday as well. If you want to find out about that and get involved, or simply send me replays, get involved in future events and all that good stuff, I do have a link to my Discord just down in the description below. Anyway guys, until next time, peace, and as always, stay awesome.